night. Good night. Good night and welcome. Good night over there on Facebook. Good night on Instagram. Good night on YouTube. Good night TikTok. Welcome to Mindful Live 500. Wow, excuse me. Mindful Live 551. Yeah, it is 9:56 p.m. on the third day in this second month in the year of our Lord 2026. I just hear the other crying, but sometimes when you ignore, she does go back to this. I know about that one. You know, you hear her cry and you pause. You want to make sure that is mine? You hear a second cry, you know it's yours. But sometimes they could kind of find a way to fall back asleep all on their own. And the cry might just be a little speed bump. So you're just hoping, you're listening. Silence. Fatherhood, boy, yeah. Good stuff, as I say. I would 100% recommend 100 out of 100. Get through, do the thing, good stuff, lovely life. Alright, so we're live. And we're here to talk about the news, to talk about the issues of the day. We see cement prices are on the way up. Yikes. The cement prices are on the way up. And that's the reality. When you hear, I recall the finance minister standing by the new head at NGC when he spoke about raising prices, and the way he's doing it, it seems high-handed without much negotiation. And they're speaking as if the raising of the gas prices, the only effect it has on the manufacturers or on NGC's accounting book, where it would be better for them. Yes, that's true. Wow. But that's not the only direction that you would see some effect in. Cement is one of those, and cement seems to be the first. Before we dive in, if you could grade it out of 5, how deep are we in the recession? Yay. You see, how deep are we in that sense? You're looking for how deep from two directions. For how deep have we fallen into it, as in where we could have been, where we were, and how deep we fell. And then there is how deep we have yet that we can go. So I don't think we fell all that deeply as yet. I think we are lining up ourselves for a very deep fall should we not catch ourselves very soon. I don't think quite yet we are seeing the maximum impact. I don't think that's where we are quite yet. When is the gas from Venezuela going to start to flow? Hi. Lol. LOL. LMAO. Ruffle. ROFL, or you know when you combine those back in the day, ROFLMAO. Woo! Yeah. That's how I respond to that one. When the gas from Venezuela going to come? You see, that was never a short thing. Like you know that gas from Venezuela is going to be coming our way. That was never something that was assured like that. Was never something that you could have banked on for sure. They were always hoping that they get the best out of that. A guy who sued Crime Watch, he lost. But he won against the police. Interesting little case there. They are striking at Tetron, hunger strike. the conditions are horrible down at Tetron, apparently. Oh, we see the opposition having a tangle with the Speaker of the House, and it's interesting. The Speaker of the House in our system is spoken of as supposed to be a fair hand in the debate. I wonder if Mrs. Prasad Visesa, seeing as she was so insulted by the fact that the senators are really president senators, would she also be insulted by the idea that the Speaker is actually a functionary of the government? She was the key to open the Veni oil gate, but now the same ground very quiet. Yeah. Because the reality is Delcy is in charge over in Venezuela, and our present administration didn't make a good showing with the Venezuelan regime. The United States basically boasted that they did not do regime change out there in Venezuela. They got rid of a singular person. They got rid of the head of the regime, but it's not regime change per se, because, always doing this with the mic, apologies again, because the regime is still in place. So it's not per se that the regime has changed. And if we were not on good terms with the regime as they existed previously, it's the same regime. In order for them to deal with us, if we already burnt that bridge, what we're asking for very likely is US intervention to force the present Venezuelan regime to deal with us. Because I think the Venezuelan regime, if I were in their place, and I already have some bad blood towards Trinidad and Tobago for whatever the reasons might be, I'm not going to do anything to help them, regardless of if the direction and vision of the regime changed a bit. All right, they're now trading with the United States. All right, they're now trading with Western nations. Still, why would they care to trade with Trinidad and Tobago? In fact, now they have a wider market open. They really don't need us. The Dragon gas deal that once was an avenue for Venezuela to access the international markets, they don't need it. They could go sell their own Dragon gas on the international market. They don't need us as a middleman, as a through sale point. Why? Why would they bother? And that's kind of the part we reach now, questioning that. Wondering if the apparent side choosing of the last half year or so was done, if it was done for oil's sake in the rejuvenated Venezuela. When are we going to see that oil? I don't necessarily have faith that, you know, it's a sure thing that we are going to see that oil. I don't have that faith. I think that might actually be unlikely. But let's jump into that cement story. Cement goes up again. TCL announces 15% increase, 6th consecutive year of price hikes. From next Monday, consumers will pay more for a bag of cement after Trinidad Cement Limited announced a 15% price increase, citing higher production costs after an increase in natural gas prices for manufacturers. Now, self I can't build a house, Shazam says. This marks the 6th consecutive year that TCL has raised its prices. The last increase took place on February 17th last year. Where's Rock Hard Cement in this? Rock Hard is right there. Rock Hard is already on the market. Rock Hard is here. There's no announcement that they are going to raise their prices. I believe Rock Hard in many of the hardwares was already negligibly cheaper. They weren't that much cheaper, like around the same price. Now this might make it that Rock Hard is significantly cheaper, and if that's the case, that may change the whole makeup of the market. That might be what happens. And if that's the case, it went from the government making decisions that locked Rock Hard out of the cement market, to now the government makes decisions that might prejudice Rock Hard inside of the cement market. Hey, Ronnie, if there isn't a commensurate tariff or some kind of quota they add on to Rock Hard there, this is an advantage to Rock Hard because Rock Hard is importing their cement. The manufacturer of Rock Hard's cement isn't going to have to pay increased gas prices from NGC. They're making that cement, I believe, out in Turkey. How many bags I need for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath? Asking for a friend. Enough that 15% you will feel that increase. So all our manufactured goods sector, from cement to snacks and drinks, going to increase, you ask? Well, according to our finance minister, he told them, please don't. That's his solution. Please don't. That's what he says when asked about whether this is going to cause inflation, whether price increases are going to happen. Please don't. And as I said, when we spoke about this previously, just like we see with Rock Hard here, that's going to be the case basically in every sector, where what would have just happened is comparatively local manufacturing has just been given a disadvantage compared to imported goods. Imported goods don't have that natural gas price that they have to pay. One moment. Yeah. Technical difficulties. All right, I'm back. We need to go on technical difficulties. Had to go and fix something. All right. But yeah, we were speaking about TCL and their prices raising, and the fact that that idea of increased gas price, the idea of increased gas price is going to literally have the same kind of TCL versus Rockhard impact, where the imported commodity has an advantage. That's going to happen in literally every sector. Every sector now basically has a latent advantage towards the imported good. Now, the argument that we're getting from the government, from NGC, from supporters of the government's decisions in that, the argument that we're getting is that this is the competitive price. This is the price on the market. What was happening before is we were not getting competitive pricing. Wi-Fi is still playing up a bit. We were not getting competitive pricing before. This is actually the real price. And manufacturers were always supposed to pay this price, and if they aren't, then they're running their own business uncompetitively. That's not the fault of NGC. And I understand the argument. I understand what they're saying, because it's true there was a subsidized pricing going on, but that doesn't change the reality as it stands currently. The current reality is that the subsidized price is what the market is accustomed to. The subsidized price is what the customers are accustomed paying. And changing that price, okay, you're saying now you're putting it on the real price. Yeah, but that real price is going to be a price increase. And to some extent, this is where the arguments for protection in local economies come in. This is what people regularly talk about when they talk about that level of protection. Because if left to fight on its own, most local manufacturers will not be able to withstand the competition from a foreign company. If left on a purely open free market to compete, it is unlikely that our local manufacturers would be able to compete with, example, Chinese manufacturers. If we have unions around every corner, making sure workers get this and workers get that, and making sure it functions a certain way, the cost of doing work, the cost of hiring people, the cost of having staff in Trinidad and Tobago would be one thing. But China doesn't have that same effect, or India doesn't have that same effect. So they don't have that worry. And if our local manufacturers now just have to compete plain and open with those other companies, very likely they will not compete. And what may in fact happen is we may just become a country of consumers, literally being unable to afford to manufacture anything. Nothing we manufacture would be in a price range that could be affordable for our people. Would that be something we want? And who would be able to pay the higher gas price? Well, not the smaller manufacturer looking to, his market he's aiming for is really and truly Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean. That's his ideal market, the lesser Antilles kind of way. Maybe it might be some conglomerate that is using Trinidad just as part of a whole international conglomerate, a whole international multinational company, and Trinidad is just one little branch of that. So the price of gas there is kind of inconsequential. They're paying it on the global market scale anyway, and that may be true. Those might be the companies that could buy the gas, but is that what you want for your local industry, for your local economy? That's why there are protections for local economies. So I wonder to myself, is there a sting coming in the tail, whereas the price for local goods very likely would be pressured upward, that in so doing there would be additional tariffs or some kind of tax placed on the imported goods too? Because if the government is looking for money, I don't think they're just going to leave the importers to now get the lion's share of all of these sales. I don't know, we'll see, but I will not be surprised if sometime in the coming few weeks we see a policy plan to tax some kind of these imported goods. We're speaking about cement here with TCL. Maybe the tariff on rock hard returns. Wouldn't that be something? If the tariff on rock hard returns, just as the complaints of the former government, the very same things that people were complaining about and saying, no, this can't work, this can't work, this is bad, it returns. While TCL remains deeply concerned about the broader impact of these gas prices on your business, end users and the construction sector, it necessitates a 15% price adjustment effective 9th of February 2026 on SACS, it stated. Adding, TCL remains firmly committed to maintaining its operations in the country, supporting more than 350 direct employees and over 400 local contractors and suppliers, and continuing its contribution to the economy as a leading foreign exchange generator, with exports expected to exceed US $40 million in 2026, it stated. We value our long-standing partnership with you and will continue to work together to navigate these challenging market conditions. We sincerely appreciate your understanding, cooperation, and continued confidence in the TCL brand. Government pie in the sky projects can keep TCL afloat while citizens buy rock hard. Well, remember, TCL is a multinational company now. They're making for an international market, so they're not too worried about it. Government pie in the sky projects, the truth is, the banks fix that. Many people these days aren't building out of pocket, they're building from the bank. So it's nearly like many home builders of late aren't as worried about the singular cost of a bag of cement as much as they're worried about being approved for the loan. You're building a house, it would have cost 1.2 million, now it costs 1.25 million. Yeah, that's not really something that plays on someone's head, beside whether they could get the loan and get approved for the loan or not. That's why, to some extent, many people may not think about it so solidly. Now, if you're building something smaller, like an extension, not a whole home, but something like an extension, or you want to cast your front yard, you want to, you don't like that dirt pavement you have around your house, you think it's about time you get some concrete walkways around your house, right? You're planning to do just that. Things like that. That's things like especially projects that would have been handled out of pocket. So you were saving up to spend 12,000 to do that piece of casting in your front yard. Well, now you have 2 more thousand you need to save. That kind of thing. And cement is, all right, the first and most obvious one. But are we going to see some increases in some other areas too? Cement alone increased 15%. But are we going to see increases otherwise? And okay, yeah, it might be only the local manufacturers that get the direct impact of the increase on gas prices. But we know how many businesses function. Some imported brands may just raise the price because their competition price cannot be lower now. If I'm importing the product and my local competition now must sell the product at $80, I could still sell it at $60 and make a profit. But why would I not sell it at $76? Still cheaper than $80, but I'm making more of a profit. Like, it befuddles me sometimes. Some of the accusations that were leveled against the manufacturers by NGC in regards to the subsidies basically suggests like these manufacturers, these businessmen are greedy, and they were maximizing that subsidy only for their own benefit. No one else was getting anything beneficial from that. No one else was getting anything beneficial from that. That's kind of how the accusation was going. But if it's the case that these are greedy businessmen, they don't care about anybody, they're only in it for themselves, and that's why they were maximizing the subsidies and not passing on the savings. They're greedy businessmen. What's going to happen when you increase the cost of their inputs? Do you think that that is now magically going to make them not greedy? If they were greedy before, is this magically going to change their greediness? Or would they remain greedy and pass on the cost again to the consumer and to the customer? Of course they would. And in these kinds of industries, if it's greed that was causing some of the problems, and you increase the cost of an input, chances are the price increase, though it's a 0.5 increase in their input cost, the price increase on the user end may be a 5%, even though it was a 0.5% increase for them. Why not, if they're greedy? As a result of that increase, the TTMA wrote to NGC calling for price increases for light industrial consumers to begin at a lower price. However, NGC chairman Gerald Ramdeen defended the company's position, saying non-energy manufacturers have benefited for more than a decade from highly subsidized gas prices sold below NGC's acquisition costs, without evidence that those savings were passed on to the consumers. I wonder what's the evidence that they're looking for that those savings were being passed on. Ramdeen said the current board would not continue the practice, describing the policy as financially unsustainable. Yeah, price increases all around. But Tanku defends Ramdeen, even as Ramdeen is obstinate with his increases at NGC. Panama City Finance Minister Devindranath Tanku has pushed back against criticism of National Gas Company Chairman Gerald Ramdeen, rejecting claims he is acting unilaterally as the government moves to raise natural gas prices and dismantle subsidies. The defense comes after industry sources warn the heavy-handed approach to contract negotiations could force several downstream manufacturers off the Point Lisas industrial estate. Speaking to Guardian Media on the sidelines of the CAF International Economic Forum program in Panama last Wednesday, Tanko rejected claims Ramdeen had become too powerful or was acting unilaterally, including accusations he was the sole driver behind efforts to extract about 28 million in retroactive port fees from Nutrien. I don't think Mr. Ramdeen is a law unto himself, Tanko said. I think he's fulfilling his mandate. The National Gas Company is not supposed to be a gift to everybody. But here's the thing, I actually kind of disagree with that statement. He said the National Gas Company is not supposed to be a gift to everybody. But I kind of believe that the natural resources of a country should function as a gift to the citizens of that country. I don't think that's a problem. But the finance minister is basically defending the head of NGC, saying that it is a government decision. It's not just the head of NGC doing his own thing, it's a government decision. The government wants that price increased. They want NGC to run profitably in all arenas, which is fair enough. TTMA supports plan to double non-energy sector exports, urges ease of doing business reforms. TTMA backs the government's goal to double non-energy manufacturing exports, but says success depends on improving the ease of doing business. The association is calling for accelerated customs digitization, electronic payments, stronger trade facilitation, and long-discussed regulatory reforms. TTMA says manufacturing remains a major contributor to the economy and pledges to work with government and stakeholders to boost exports and competitiveness. The TTMA has welcomed the government's objective to double exports from the local non-energy manufacturing sector, but says achieving it will require concrete steps to improve the ease of doing business. And I don't know, but I find the government currently doesn't seem like they're heading in the direction of making it easier for these manufacturers to do business. Your goal is to double the export of non-energy sector manufacturing. But at the same time, you're having a serious price increase on the natural gas supply. Now, granted, you're saying it's just market price they're paying, understood. But the complaint being made by the Manufacturers Association, the suggestion they're making is that things like this need to be done with some form of consultation, and you could ease people into it. Okay, you're saying that we weren't paying the real price, fine. But you're going to just overnight switch it to the real price? People built entire companies based on that pricing. To switch it overnight is asking a lot for the company to edit their business plan to continue to be profitable. And if in discussions on the natural gas, you're being high-handed, you're not actually having a discussion, there's no negotiation, it's your way or the highway, there's no room for any even sliver of a change. If that's the case, how well would the manufacturers work with you on your own goals? To me, that's similarly in line with the Venezuelan issue. If you made yourself an enemy to the Venezuelan regime and the US government went in and changed the leader of the regime, but it's the same regime, if you are an enemy to that regime, what now? You know, there's the saying, let your words be few and sweet. In case you have to eat them back, they'll be easy to eat. I don't think the high-handed my way or the highway aggravating people in all kind of sectors of society would work to your benefit in the long run. Yeah, calling the independent senators brown nose bootlickers feels good to you and your base. But good luck getting them to have a charitable by default view of anything that you do. Okay, you would hope that the independent senators are mature enough that an insult from the prime minister doesn't mean that they're automatically going to be against you in everything that you do. You would hope so, but that's not necessarily the case. People could have grudges just for things like that. But even in that, what I would expect nonetheless is, although they may not have an automatic say that they're not going to support the prime minister, they will at least have a negative view of the prime minister from now on. That negative view of the prime minister very likely is permanent in the view of all of those senators. They are gearing up for the dragon gas, which will be at higher cost to bring to the market. Are you sure we are getting that dragon gas? Because dragon gas was helpful to Venezuela when they didn't have access to the international market, and we did. So they could have sold some of their gas through us and gotten access to that market. But why would they care for that now? Why would they care for that now? The reason Venezuela was giving sweetheart deals to the Caribbean was part of Chavez and their international geopolitical plan. How their aim was to spread that left-wing politics within countries within their sphere of influence, and they were attempting to increase that sphere of influence. If they're heading in another direction, I heard Delcy speak out something negatively even about socialism. If they're heading in another direction in Venezuela, where they're not necessarily looking to buddy up with the Caribbean paupers, they have no interest in giving sweetheart deals to CARICOM anymore. Why would they care for Dragon to continue? I don't see it as a given that Dragon will continue. What if Delcy and they have a long memory and they remember the words of our current administration and they hold grudges? What if? Because it looks like, to me, a lot of what we're hoping for out of that Venezuela situation is basically a favor, eh? That we were hoping for a favor because we aren't a necessary part of the equation. We aren't needed. You says, then what was the deal Kamala made with Rubio to get our support? I don't know. I don't know. But Mr. Trump, the President of the United States, has shown himself to be willing to change his mind on people he made deals with. He told the Iranian protesters, keep going at it, help is on its way, keep going. That was what, 2 weeks ago? Thousands of Iranian protesters have died since. And now it's said that he is in negotiation with the Iranian regime. Out of the deal, the man is willing to make a deal in any direction. So if initially the plan was with regime change, Trinidad will be a nice facilitator of what needs to happen. But now Delcy shows herself willing to work with the United States so they don't have to go through the disruption of toppling the entire regime. They could just leave things to run as they were running, and now it's running with the pro-America agenda. If that's the case, Shell is the company spearheading the Dragon gas deal. It's still on their punch list, but it's not up to Shell. Shell doesn't own the Dragon gas field. So it's not up to Shell what they do with the gas coming out of the Dragon gas field. You know, considering that one of our government ministers basically said nobody cares to go to Ghana, this is an interesting one coming soon. TNT's first non-stop flight to Ghana. Listen, politicians have zero shame. Politicians have zero shame. Nature lover says friendly bet it comes true. I hope it does. I'm not for no reason would I hope for disaster to Trinidad and Tobago. What's your thoughts on the UAE investments in Trinidad? I don't know them personally that well. But yeah, politicians have no shame. After insulting the possible Ghana aviation deal, it seems like the present government went through with it. You says Delcy is pretty much Rubio puppet. It's not up to her, it's up to the deal Rubio made beforehand. I don't think it works like that 100%. I do think that she is an American puppet, not Rubio, the United States, more so Trump. And I do agree that she is a US puppet to a large extent. But that doesn't mean that she doesn't have some say on the matter. I am 100% certain she would have a lot of say on the matter. Because, yes, the US can go in and topple the entire Venezuelan regime. They do have the military power to do that. But one, the strike squad isn't even in the Caribbean anymore. It is currently in the Middle East, dealing with the Iranian situation. That's one. And two, there is a political consequence to pay for going in again and attempting to remove another Venezuelan leader. One that you don't allege now is involved in drug trafficking. So she isn't 100% a puppet. She is a useful half puppet, but she isn't 100% a puppet. She might have just one request and he says no deals with TNT. How hard would it be for the US to give her that? Not hard at all. And that's the point I'm making with Mr. Trump. He has shown himself willing to make the pragmatic deal. Yes, he will change the deal that he had previously if it works better. If she says, I am going to listen to everything you see, everything you request of me, I'm going to do, there's going to be no pushback. I'm even going to squeeze down on the radicals inside of Venezuela. I'm going to repress them on your behalf. All I say is allow me to decide not to make that deal with Trinidad and Tobago. And in terms of the United States, remember the United States, their mantra for all of this action is America first. America first. Someone said of the two political parties, one has bad ideas, the other no ideas. I disagree. They both have ideas, and they both have bad ideas regularly. Yeah, the mantra of this present American administration is America first. Trinidad's dragon gas deal is irrelevant and inconsequential to America first policy. You says that drama between Kamala and Delcy was just theater. Will she really never work with TNT? I don't think it was theater. I think people are people at all stages. I don't think that because people reach to higher positions in terms of political office, that all of a sudden insults are no longer insulting. Now, I don't know that the strained relationship is enough to mean that Trinidad and Tobago is blacklisted from dealing with Venezuela. I don't know that to be the case. I am just saying I wouldn't be surprised if it is. And that's why so many people were pleading for diplomacy. Be diplomatic. Yes, you could have facilitated all the facilitations you facilitated, but there was no need for the extra spice inside of it, because we may now have to pay back for that. But yeah, after when they were in opposition, they lambasted this deal. The first charter flight from Ghana could arrive in TNT in April if Trade, Industry and Tourism Minister has his way. Speaking with reporters on Sunday at the Piako International Airport, Maharaj explained that a direct TNT Ghana connection would open new markets both for trade and investment, but also, more importantly, for tourism. According to Maharaj, a chartered Ethiopian Airlines aircraft will be used for the inaugural service, which is already seeing positive interest. Our feedback is that the inaugural flight is going to be fully booked, he said. Maharaj first announced plans to link TNT and Ghana in November 2025 at a post-cabinet media conference. In that announcement, he said the intention was to create a transatlantic hub linking the east to the west, with TNT as the epicenter. I remember certain government ministers saying nobody want to go there, that this was a nothing. There was no boast to be made in making a deal with Ghana. Who want to go there? You know, politicians are shameless, you know. They would tell you that was a horrible idea and then come in power and do the same idea. Here's another example. Here's another example of something very similar to that. Munilal talks on with Indian energy companies to reopen refinery. Anybody else here old enough to remember when an Indian energy company was coming to Trinidad to reopen the refinery and the UNC opposition chased the man out of the country basically? The only thing they didn't do was assemble with the pitchforks and flambeaus. They ran the man out of the country. How dare he come to restart the refinery? They corrupt. That company is corrupt. Energy Minister Dr. Rudal Munilal describes the restart of the Point-of-Care refinery as a central part of the government's international energy strategy, with discussions now underway with Indian energy companies as TNT seeks partners to bring the facility back into operations. LOL. 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 You know, I'll be the ice cream on the idiotic cake. Imagine if Mr. Jindal himself is who they bring back. Imagine if, for a moment, they bring back literally the same man and the same company they chased out of Trinidad previously. And you know what's the insulting part about that? The government could do that, and there will still be loyal supporters saying they are geniuses. They are geniuses. Wow, look at that movement. They know how to do this thing. They chase these companies out of the country. This was the PNM's plan. The PNM's plan was use an Indian company to restart the refinery. the opposition halted it. India just had successful talks with Venezuela. I mean, they had successful talks with the United States on behalf of Venezuela. And the intention of that is to continue squeezing Russia. It's all geopolitics. It's all geopolitics. India was buying a lot of Russian oil, keeping the Russians' economy afloat to some extent. Now they're aiming to squeeze that out. And it's also on Cuba too. Venezuela was supplying Cuba with oil. It's all geopolitics. And now Cuba does not have that supply. And the United States is warning any country to not attempt to replace that supply to Cuba. They're attempting to squeeze Cuba out. So don't be surprised if Cuba falls in not too distant the future, because that is the attempt right now. Bring an Indian company to restart the refinery. Funny, funny, funny. Funny. Hey, Crime Watch lawsuit backfires. Mechanic loses against Ian, wins against state. Crime Watch host Ian Allen has been cleared of civil liability in a lawsuit arising out of the arrest of a Shogunist mechanic who appeared on his television program nearly 7 years ago. In a judgment delivered yesterday, High Court Judge Justice Westman James dismissed claims of wrongful arrest and false imprisonment brought against Allen by Daniel Ramnath. However, the court found that Ramnath's constitutional rights were breached by the police following his arrest and ordered the state to pay more than $250,000 in damages. You says politics is war. Why will UNC want TNT to benefit from the refinery under the PNM when they can crash it and do the same plan, you says? Politics is not supposed to be war. War is supposed to be war. Politics is supposed to be the affairs of the polity. Polity being the people. The affairs of the people is not supposed to be a war like that. It's a war because we engage in tribal politics, and people on the UNC believe it's their tribe against people on the PNM's tribe. So they're okay with the PNM's tribe failing even if it hurts them because they want a tribal victory. While the idea of politics done correctly is that the entirety of Trinidad and Tobago is the tribe. So regardless of which government comes in, we're looking to benefit the entirety of the tribe. Ramnath's lawsuit stemmed from events surrounding his appearance on Allen's program on September 19th, 2018. According to Ramnath, he attended the studio in Shogunist voluntarily to air a grievance about a customer who allegedly owed him money. He alleged that during his visit, Allen confined him to a room for approximately 75 minutes until police officers arrived and arrested him. Ramnath was subsequently taken to the Shogunist police station, where he remained in custody for 6 days before being released without charge. In his claim, Ramnath contended that his detention was unlawful and that he was subject to poor treatment while in police custody, including being held in unsanitary conditions and assaulted by officers. The Office of the Attorney General denied wrongdoing, maintaining that the police acted within the law. In dismissing the claim against Allen, Justice James ruled that there was insufficient evidence to support the allegation that Ramnath was deprived of his liberty before police intervention. I find that very interesting, at least with the story that they gave it in the news here. How did Mr. Allen get him to stay there until the police came if Mr. Allen didn't deprive him of his freedom? But okay, I wasn't there, I don't know the evidence. However, although he lost the case against Mr. Allen, he still got through with a $250,000 payment from the government, from the police. And this is the point I've been making. I've been saying this regularly of late. Our judicial system is active. We are becoming a more litigious society, a more litigious country. I think a lot of the police action is going to end in lawsuits. I wouldn't be surprised if, as simple as it is, the Joshua, what's his name? Joshua Samaru case, if that ends up in a lawsuit, which it may be entitled to. And there are winners coming out. There are people beating the government in these lawsuits. Speaking of bad conditions in prisons and holding areas, hunger strike at Tetron unfit for humans. High-risk prisoners protest prison conditions, but police chief says jail is jail. Prisoners detained at Tetron Barracks and Stobbles Bay in Chaguaramas embarked on a hunger strike yesterday and have vowed to keep it up until they are removed from the facilities, which they say are unfit for human occupation, accusing prison and police officials of employing psychological warfare tactics. To break them, the 11 inmates said, "We want the government to return us to regular detention and to remove us from military detention." The hunger strike began with the prisoners refusing breakfast and continued throughout the day with refusals of lunch and dinner. While Prison Commissioner Carlos Carraspi did not respond to calls, Commissioner of Police Alistair Guevara declared, "Jail is jail." Pressed on calls by the inmates, he fired back. Persons in lawful custody do not get to pick and choose where they are housed. The next thing we will hear is that they will be asked to be transferred to Port of Spain prison to take in the carnival vibes. Here's my problem with this kind of arrogance from our police commissioner here. They said prisoners detained. Are all of these men convicts, or are many of these men, if not all of these men, detainees? As in, men waiting for their day in court. And if the men have not been found guilty by the judicial system of anything, they are assumed innocent until proven guilty. And the idea then of detaining them is in the chance that they are a violent person. You want to make sure that you don't lose the opportunity to make sure they aren't outside affecting the public. But in that detainment, the understanding must be that this person is assumed innocent. So we can't have a jail is jail attitude when talking about people detained. Detained isn't proof of guilt. And some of these people were moved during the state of emergency and emergency powers, as far as I could recall. Those emergency powers aren't statements of guilt. They aren't proof of guilt. So what are you saying? The commissioner further explained the prison service assigns inmates based on security needs and available accommodation, not personal preference. Tetron and Stobbles Bay were designed as prisons, and all facilities meet the standards for lawful detention. However, the prisoners, speaking through one of their attorneys, who did not want to be identified, insisted that their constitutional rights continue to be breached and that they have an entitlement under the 1953 prison rules and the Prisons Act of TNT. We want to be removed from Tetron and Stobbles Bay because these places were not designed to be prisons, they told Guardian Media. Listen, this is the kind of attitude that keeps costing us money as a country. If these men sue and they were right, all this bumper talk about jail is jail would just work to our disadvantage and more money being paid to these men. Listen, being a bad boy in Trinidad is like being assured every 2 to 3 years the government will do something foolish and give you easy access to a couple hundreds of thousands of dollars in a lawsuit. Like any high-ranking enough bad boy in Trinidad won a lawsuit against the government. It's a given. And I think that's a problem. That's a problem. The prisoners also said they have not been able to see their families for months, having not been allowed any contact with the outside world since July 18th, 2025. We have no airing, so we have not seen the outside of a cell since then, they said, adding that their physical health has been declining. At least one inmate spoke of being afflicted by skin rashes. We have been denied bed sheets, and the mattresses we have to sleep on are filthy and moldy. We have not been allowed any grooming products, and many of us still have to use buckets to defecate in, which is a hazard to us. Revealing that they have also been denied any reading material, the inmate said, we are also not being given access to any documents for our criminal matters. There are some of us from whom defense statements were taken, and that is now in police possession. We don't know what has become of them, as we have no contact with our attorneys. So yes, these men are on remand. Prison Officers Association President Gerard Gordon issued a measured response to the hunger strike yesterday. Incarceration is the punishment imposed by the courts. It must never become punishment in itself, Gordon said, pointing out that this principle is firmly grounded in the United Nations Standard Minimum Rules for the treatment of prisoners, known as the Mandela Rules, to which TNT is guided. Now imagine that. Apparently our police commissioner is ignorant of that fact. These rules make it clear that all persons deprived of their liberty must be treated with dignity and humanity, regardless of the offense they are alleged to have committed. Like the prisoners, Gordon underscored, it is important for the public to understand that many of the individuals held at Tetron Barracks have not been found guilty of any offense. They are on remand, awaiting the determination of their matters before the courts. As far as the legal system goes, these are innocent men that our police commissioner is ringing and showing off on. Jail make the right fig, basically. Jail is jail. Next thing they go say they want to feel the Christmas vibes in Port of Spain. The men are saying they are being held in inhumane conditions. The only right answer to me is that the men lie. To me, that's the only way you give a correct answer there. The men are lying. Because once the men telling the truth, you have to do something about it. So the only correct answer that could be given is they're lying. Once you cannot say they're lying, something needs to happen. Justice delayed is justice denied. And when people are subjected to conditions that fall below basic human standards while still legally innocent, it undermines the very foundation of our justice system. And he is right. The justice system has to be seen to be just. If the justice system isn't seen to be just, it's going to get hard to get people to believe in it. And believing in the justice system is how we have a judicial system that functions in the first place. It's the only way we get people to hold to court rulings, because people have trust in that system. But if it's seen that in the system you can be innocent and still punished, then why trust the system? The system is not trustworthy. He said reports of inadequate ventilation, limited access to family visits, deplorable sanitary conditions, skin rashes, and individuals being forced to relieve themselves in buckets were deeply troubling. These are not luxuries being asked for. They are basic human rights and minimum standards of care, Gordon said. Yes, minimum human rights. And yeah, I know that oftentimes the whole human rights discussion could be overdone, but that doesn't mean that we get to ignore the whole idea of human rights in its entirety, because ignoring that is how you end up in the atrocities that we read about historically. The Mandela rules are explicit on matters of accommodation, sanitation, health, contact with family, and humane treatment. Gordon added, when justice is not seen to be done and when the conditions of detention become degrading, the consequences extend far beyond the prison walls. It erodes public confidence in the justice system, fuels anger and resentment, and ultimately negatively affects the entire society. A system that mistreats those in its custody today can just as easily fail law-abiding citizens tomorrow. Look at that. Well said, Mr. Gerard Gordon, Prison Officers Association President. Well said. He spoke better than the Police Social and Welfare Association usually ever speaks. He certainly spoke better than the police commissioner. And here's the thing. This is what I mean about diplomacy. Learning how to talk, learning how to be reasonable, not speaking like an arrogant buffoon every time you get the chance. You know, he didn't accede to any of the statements given by the prison officers. In terms of actions, the actions taken by the police commissioner and the actions taken by Mr. Gordon here may actually be the same thing. But one may very well, just through the words, ease the situation, while the other, just through the words, agitate the situation. You says, after experiencing this horrible justice system, I'm surprised TNT doesn't have a domestic terrorist attacking the state. We don't have someone with that mindset quite yet. But this is what I've been warning about. There are many people frustrated in Trinidad and Tobago. I think they're frustrated with governance in Trinidad and Tobago. I think what hasn't happened is the desperation in real living conditions hasn't reached the stage to foment that. If the government allows desperation to set in the country, I think the frustration is already there. If you have the desperation come meet the frustration, it ain't gonna be good. Won't be a good idea. You know, the Prime Minister has been railing of late on the independent senators, who she has been calling president senators, basically insulting their independence, saying that they aren't really independent because they are chosen by the president, who is chosen by politicians. And something that annoys me about that is the way Mrs. Prasad Bisesa and her government, her supporters, pretend as if they don't understand the way our entire governmental system functions. And the checks and balances and the people that are assumed as independent, although really and truly their appointment shows that they can't be independent, really and truly. And then it annoys me that a lot of people are pretending like they can't understand this, like this is beyond their comprehension. This is something brand new. Look at what they're doing now. This new thing they're doing now is such a bad thing. How can we allow them to do this new thing, this new way that they are advantaging the system? Really? Really? Opposition Vieira seek to send PM to Privileges Committee. Mark says no. A bid by the opposition and independent Senator Anthony Vieira to put Prime Minister Kamala Prasad Bisesa before the Committee of Privileges was shut down by Senate President Wade Mark on Tuesday. Mark ruled that having carefully studied two correspondences received from opposition leader of government business Dr. Amory Brown and Vieira seeking to raise two matters of privilege, he was convinced that neither of the two submissions meets the threshold to be raised as a matter of privilege. The matters of privilege arose from Prasad Bisessa's statements last month that independent senators were brown nosers and bootlickers and had been appointed by a president who was a low-level PNM functionary. The PM's remarks were made ahead of the debate in the Senate on the government zone of special operations, which then flopped in the Senate. The Zoso exercise was intended, we know that the PM was hit with calls to name the senators and take the matter to the police, DPP, and the Integrity Commission. Prasad Bisessa has since said she would not name the senators. The matter of privilege, as submitted by Brown, cited allegations against two members of the independent bench in the Senate concerning seeking personal favors in exchange for support of the law reform bill. Brown said the Prime Minister has made serious, reckless, and unsubstantiated allegations against senators of the independent bench. He said these statements, which arose before, during, and after the debate of the Zoso bill, have brought the Senate and, by extension, the Parliament into serious odium and disrepute. But the Senate President, who is supposed to be a kind of neutral host of the debate, they're supposed to, just be the referee. And the idea of a referee is supposed to be balanced and neutral. But Wade Mark was a low-level UNC functionary, to use the term used by our Prime Minister. Yet he is the President of the Senate. And this is one of my main problems with this whole furor that the Prime Minister is raising. She doesn't have a problem with the system. Her problem is that it doesn't currently work for her. Do you think when it reaches the time for the Prime Minister to appoint her low-level functionary into being the president, that the Prime Minister is going to say, let's disrupt this whole thing and figure out a way to actually get an independent senator? Let's have a national vote to really get an independent president. Let's have a national vote for president. Do you think the Prime Minister would suggest that? Or do you think the Prime Minister will gladly put in her very own low-level functionary and make sure her own low-level functionary puts in their own favored senators and then go ahead and call her own favored senators independent senators too? They don't care. It's the hypocrisy of it all. She is trying to use the facts of how our system runs to bamboozle people into jumping onto this bandwagon that, oh no, these senators aren't actually independent, but that has always been how the system runs. The Senate President isn't independent either, but he's technically supposed to be. It's Wade Mark. I wonder, would they be upset for that too? Would they be upset for that too? All right, folks. That's all I have for now. But they supported all the other bills. Why is she so distasteful? Listen, the UNC came into power and their strategy from the word go was intimidation on the independent senators. Intimidation on the independent senators. That was the idea. And I think it was a political strategy. I think the political strategy was to put the independent senators on their back foot from the jump so that all decisions they make would be subject to increased scrutiny, trying to force them to make decisions in their own favor. What's your take on all these TikTok influencers getting jobs in Wassa? 2 more just got. I don't know anything about that, but it's also not surprising. Governments pay you to do what they like you to do. It has always been the way the thing goes. That's again why I say I frown at them when they make it seem like, you know, oh my goodness, how dare the previous administration do X while they are continuing to do X too. Like, okay, if you're saying you're an anti-Xer, well, you don't do X, and then we could have that fair discussion. But you're doing the same thing. You're doing the same thing, and you're enjoying it. All right. Hold it down, people. That's all I have for now. I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained. You're looking for some extra classes. Hit us up on Mindful Education. Most subjects for CXC and CAPE. We also have pod classes from early childhood all the way up. So if you're interested, hit us up. Until then, people, hold it down. Stay good. Stay inside, outside. Sketchy. I'm Nathan Springer. I'm going out to you guys for the next Mindful Live. Tomorrow is Wednesday. Yeah, tomorrow around, it will be a little later tomorrow, 9:30 p.m. going up there. But until then, people, hold it down. Stay good. I'm out. Peace. Bye.